do that there. Okay, I've started a recording, so let's see how that goes. You'll merge those together somehow, right, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is your phone freezing now also?
No.
No, okay, that's good. Okay, so Dale, we were just looking at this one line here. If you copied all of what you're seeing there and put it into an AHK file, yeah, you can try and do
just
that.
these lines.
Yeah.
Say paste.
So VBA does some things a little bit different. The underscore that is at the end of most of the lines are just to indicate that it continues on the next line. So in essence, you could remove that and the new line and get a very long line of code here. But that is what VBA is seeing, and it is kind of what AutoHotkey would interpret it as if you changed it. If you extend the window that you've opened now to maybe fill more of the width of your screen, just and if you then removed those new lines between them, so you just made it all one line and removed those underscores.
Like backspace it.
Yeah. Like that. And
is there any like benefit to like put one thing on each line after each
there's no benefit other than readability. And
yeah, that's the only thing.
That's fair enough to have, but in AutoHotkey it doesn't interpret the underscore as anything, so it's probably not like it being there. But if you instead put in the line return just before the comma between the parameters, so at the end of test1 PDF, double quotes, and there, put in an enter. This now would do the same as what it did in VBA, because the comma is at the beginning of the line. Then AutoHotkey will know to trancoon those together. So if you go to the end of that line and remove the underscore and move in front of the comma.
Oh, I see.
And put the comma on the next line. And yeah, like that, exactly. Then you have the same type of look as you did on the other one, but instead AutoHotkey would just need the comma instead of the underscore.
I could see that if you're doing things with these different parameters, but I doubt probably will.
Yeah, and that's just to show that that's all of what the VBA is doing. But in our case, in what we're doing, we would probably only need the 3 first ones, and all of the rest of them optimize for export, optimize for print, range, or export all document from 1 to 1 and stuff like that. All of those extra ones, those are optimal, or those are optional parameters. Yeah.
And Jackie, would they have a default value, and that's why you can drop them out?
Yeah. Exactly. And if you went back to VBA, you could probably see which of them were optional.
And Dale, just so everyone else, can you zoom in some on site? Hold down Control and scroll. It's the easy way. There you go.
Hey, my plus and minus keys work on the keyboard too. Very handy.
So yeah, this is just going over this single operation here of taking something you record and then making it work from AutoHotkey. You could just as easily make it work in Word. then you just wouldn't have the hotkey. Do you get what I'm saying? So if you added this script to something with the hotkey, you could still press whatever you usually press, and then it will act on the active Word document.
Right. Oh, right. So does this only work for Word documents?
Yeah.
Oh, because the code I have, it works in Excel as well, because it's, you know.
Yeah, but you replicate what you're doing. And again, this is going to be lightning fast and super, no issues.
Reliable.
And
yep.
You could even default change like the file name to add something to it programmatically, right? Or insert a date. There's so many things you can do when you have a programmatic approach.
Yeah. No, I was just saying I need one for Word and then one for Excel. Huh.
Yeah, I understand. I know,
Okay.
and I'm just saying you replicate this in Excel, right? You look at the
Yep.
same process. But if you look at my Excel function library, I have an export, and so that's the beautiful thing of functions, right? When someone's done all the work, you're like, hey, what do you want to do? I want to save, and probably the file path, right? Like in the name, like the folder and the name, and that's all you feed to it. Now, and then the type, like, so in my Excel one, if I remember right, you can make it like XLSX, you can make it PDF, maybe HTML, CSV, and you don't have to go through all this stuff.
Right.
I understand, Dell, because the one you have where you're sending the keys, it works really fast, and you only see the thing flash very short. But a lot of things with you have sleeps going on, those are hard-coded sleeps. If something on your system is kind of halty, or if Word is slow, or if something is updating in the background or whatever, those might fail, because it might not always take 555 milliseconds to happen. And that's all you had a single wait for window to exist or whatever, active. But without having many of those, the chance of it always working, right? Here, the only thing that you're waiting for is for Word to be active. And then you send X12, and half a second later, you start sending the Alt T and the P and Alt S, and then you wait half a second, hoping that will be enough for the "Are you sure?" message box to show up. Yeah. And then you send the Alt Y, and in most cases that will probably work, and you will have saved it in 1 second. But in the cases where something else is going on, that's where the code that Joe was kind of talking about, in having two versions of the code, one for Excel and one for Word, it will not miss, so to speak. You're programmatically telling Word to actually export it as a PDF, right?
And you could tie them both to the same hotkey, but use if when active. Right? You decide which one to run, so you don't have to learn a different hotkey, right? It'll choose different code to run based on which program you're in.
Yeah, because every once in a while it won't save it with the correct name, and you go, well, where did that file go? It doesn't get the file name correctly.
And honestly, also it all gets back to what you're comfortable with and what you're using, right? And if it's reliable and it works. But it's also more, the reason why I wanted to do this example was it's more of just a concept. If you're doing, several steps, hey, here's how you can, even if you don't know COM, right? You can look at you can record a macro, and then often, like that save function that we were using there, that Jackie was walking through, that is far more complex than the average stuff, right? The average stuff, like the bold a cell or to change all the font a certain size, it's one line, and you change what usually, Jackie, the equals to the colon equals, and it's like, it's almost good. And then put the pointer at the beginning of it to know where it's talking to. And it's really easy to do.
Yeah. As you said, Joe, here we were exporting to a PDF, but the function that Word is using is just its general exporting function. And of course, that function has a lot of parameters. But had it just been bold text, that would have been a single active document selection bold, and that would be the line. Right?
Which, Jackie, I'd like to also emphasize of the whole, and you know, we're all at different levels, right? Don't get me wrong. And when I first started with AutoHotkey, I was using a macro recorder. But anytime you use some sort of a macro recorder, your chances are you're not going to end up with the most concise, you know, specific code, because it doesn't know for sure what it needs, so it throws in all this extra stuff. So that's why I don't like macro recorders. They can kind of get you close, but they add so much, I'm going to say junk for lack of a better term, that you just don't need. That when you know, I use it and I piecemeal out of it. I pick from it and borrow it. I don't take the whole thing.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something else, and that's because we shortly touched on RPA, and we just had the meeting the other day with my company, and one of the things the IPA expert or the person talking ended up kind of disclaiming was that, yeah, and as soon as the program is updated, if something updates, or something changes, a field is moved, button is slightly adjusted,
right,
then the RPA bot that was made will fail. And okay, that sounds a little bit weird, but that is, as Tank has put in some of his, that's because they're doing the very, very lowest, very, very basics of how to automate something. To make it work in anything, they are really doing image searches and mouse moves and clicks and stuff. So as soon as you move something, that check if the button is there, it fails. Or if the field is at a specific place, it fails. And this is what we here wanted to say. If that single wait for the window was a little bit longer, then it's not a safe way to wait for it for half a second. You should instead input like win wait active. You can input a win wait for the save dialog, and you can put in a win wait for the are you sure dialog. So instead of the 2 sleeps, you can make it a little bit more robust just by actually waiting for those windows to exist instead of just having 2 sleeps there.
Yeah, and really good point checking.
Apparently Tank has done a good amount of stuff with RPA, and the bots they make there, if they record a video that shows that the bot clicks on something and then the user waits 3 seconds until he does something, then the end result will be a bot that waits 3 seconds until it continues. And to me, it's just like, shouldn't the operator might not be the correct word, but the bot writer or whatever we call it, take and refine what happens in those very small cases a little bit and make it just a tad more robust. But
yeah, scrutinize and optimize, right?
Yeah, but apparently that's not what we're paying for.
You know, I made a video just the other day of the top, I think it was 9 things RPA companies don't tell you before they bring you on. And one of them I had in there, that a lot of those RPA tools, the solution you actually get isn't like the most robust, you know, so it's a lot of screen, you know, searching and stuff, when there are much more optimal ways. And because it gets back to what you just mentioned, Jackie, more often than not, it's the actual implementator. That's not a word, is it?
Yeah.
Implementer. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Of the person doing the coding, like, you know, saying, hey, let's do this. And if they don't know, or they're in a rush or whatever, they're not going to go back and, hey, controls were available. We can connect to this thing with controls. It'll be much more robust and speed. Yeah. So it's not that the cool tools, I think, aren't capable. It's that just you're still relying on humans to, you know, find that optimized path to make it robust. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have anything else, Dale? Guys,
Okay.
see GeekDude's here, and I don't know.
Oh,
if you have something else, it's great. But I see he's here.
Well, just a quick question. So I have Office 2019, but what happens with Office 365? I think we talked about that before.
I didn't realize it. I forget who I was talking to, but I'm actually running Office 365, and I've shared code with other people. I think it's fine, unless you have the cloud version. Of course, there's a cloud version of Office 365 too, right?
So the COM still works with Office 365?
Yeah. The desktop version.
How you view it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you have the desktop installed programs, you can still have Office 365, which is a cloud-based solution. So it will still be able to save your documents in the cloud and stuff like that, and you will be able to access them from anywhere as long as you have a browser. But the macro will only work when you open them on, let's say, a desktop computer. So even though you have them available on your phone or whatever, you wouldn't be able to run a macro just because you had the Word document open on your phone.
Right. I see.
And to your point earlier, Jackie, while the timing all might work fine on your computer, Dale, but if if you gave it to someone else and their computer wasn't as fast, right, it suddenly things start breaking down when you rely on sleeps to control. And that's why I think Jackie's a really good idea of wait for the Win active to tell it to move forward instead of having some sleeps. And the other crazy thing is you may not think like a half a second's a long time, but when you start putting those things in there and not waiting for the sleep, you'll realize, wow, it could be going a lot faster than it currently does.
Yeah, sometimes there's two sides of that. Sometimes it goes too fast. And did it happen?
Absolutely.
So. But the PDF, it's set to launch the PDF afterwards. So you'd say, oh, is it coming up the way I, made it? So you're good.
Incidentally, by the way, someone asked the other day, they wrote me and wanted to know about opening and editing PDF files and getting text. And I have a solution where I basically drove Word. Word can open PDFs, and it often does a really good job of keeping the structure and everything. And so that was when I had an COM object where I could open it up, grab, get the text and actually manipulate around. And because there's a lot of great stuff you can do with COM inside Word with the different fonts and everything.
Yeah, it is pretty good at opening PDFs that are not images.
Well, one version would even do OCR on the image. I think they backed that out, if I remember correctly. But yeah.
Oh,
okay. Did you have anything else?
No, this was it.
Okay.
Yeah, I've another job I have. They'd send out this document. It was like the calendar for the year, but looked like it was done in Word, and then it looked like they printed it out and then they scanned it and sent us the images, so you couldn't even search the document.
Yeah.
I was like, come on. But, it was like a 50-page document. You knew something was in there, but I can't even find it.
Jackie had a fun story with that general process, right, Jackie, where you're helping some colleagues and they were getting this document and he happened to ask the right person, right, Jackie, where you're like, where is this coming from? And thankfully that guy.
Yeah, it was an amazing journey that document was on, right? It was received in some kind of mailbox somewhere, and then apparently was sent off to someone else, and it was apparently first in an Excel format. Then that person made changes, made it into a PDF, sent it off to someone else, who then tried to get the information out of the PDF, made it into an Excel file, made some changes, and sent it on as a PDF. And in the end, someone had an image PDF that he then tried to get values off, that he then needed to type into an online form to get it to actually search the things from the first process. that came from the company who had made the original Excel sheet. So it was just like, what?
Do we make it any harder?
Yeah, it was really, it was going through. So it came into one end and then went through 3, 4, 5 steps. I don't even remember how many. And then ended up on this guy's desk that then had to research the same values at the company to report back to his boss that had also received the PDF at one point. It's just like, it was sad. It could have been.
But thankfully you caught that, Jackie. And that gets back to, again, you asked the right person who also said, well, let me go investigate. And he did a little due diligence, right? And he found out that, like, this is electronic. Like, we have it electronically in the start. Yeah. This is ridiculous. But how many people don't even do that, right? That's
I don't know how many times he had actually done it. And he was like, he had said, I need to get a value from this PDF. And I said, have you tried OCSing or OCRing it? And it's like, no, what's that? And I was like, and I sent him a small OCR tool, and he's like, oh, this OCR tool is just great. It's saving me so much time, so I don't have to write it down myself. And then I said, but why are you getting it as a PDF? It looks like it comes from Excel originally. And he's like, it might. and then it
awesome.
rolled,
yeah. It's such a great story, man. All right, let's GeekDude, you ready for whatever you're going to share with us?
Yeah, probably be pretty brief. For reasons that may become more obvious as we go on.
I'll get some water.
What do you guys see right now?
The Cloud.AHK or Cloud.AHK.com blocks.
Oh, cool.
And your head.
I guess I can.
And it's clear.
No, I could have one thing as video and another thing as screen share. Learning something new every day.
Nice.
Welcome back, Jackie.
Oh. There he is. His headphones are off.
Welcome back, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you.
So I've been working on this project recently, Cloud.AHK.com. I've showed Joe a bit of it, but the idea is that I take a Scratch-style drag-and-drop block-based editor, and I harness the ease of use there for making AutoHotkey scripts. So all of this section on the right here is dynamically generated from whatever's on the left. So see, if I drag things around here, the code on the right sort of shuffles around. So the idea is that for people new to the language, they aren't maybe so familiar with the syntax of it, but they know what it is that they want to do. They can browse through like a palette of all the things that AutoHotkey would be able to do, or at least all the things I've implemented so far, and just grab what they want and drop it in and make a script out of that.
Can I butt in here? Joe, are you sure about the way that we're recording now? Or do you want to
I started recording as well, but I figured because you'll have a longer part of it, my computer crashed, GeekDude. So I figure I'll still stitch yours together because that'll be the bigger part of it instead of trying to do 3 parts.
Okay.
Right? But then, yeah, no, it's a good question. Go for it, GeekDude.
So I've got some events set up so far. You can make a hotkey with the on key press event block. You can do simple remaps. That generates the code over there. Variables all work. Everything here available so far as far as I know, is in a functioning state. And it's taken me 2 weeks intensely working on this to get it to work at all. But now that things are put together such that I can focus on adding blocks, I think I'll be able to get a lot more functionality into it pretty quickly. So far, the only AutoHotkey specific stuff is this events tab and the mouse and keyboard tab. I've got the send command here. I've called it type because really that's what it's doing. And you can see that maps over to send raw, whatever you give it. Because I figure as a new user, you might want to do something like type hello, exclamation point. And I've seen a lot of people, they'll try to send that and they say, it sends hello, but where'd my exclamation point go? So, in addition to making it easier to write AutoHotkey scripts, one of the project goals is making it easier to understand what commands are doing. Like the block input command, for example, is relatively complicated. If I grab the help page for that, you've got these examples: block input on off. What does that mean? Block input send mouse, block input mouse move. Why are there 3 examples? Why are there separate sections of parameters? Really, there's a lot of different functionality all put through this one command. So over in Cloud.AHK, a lot of that gets broken out into more discrete components. You can, well, if I pull these up side by side, you can see there's a block here for each different set of parameters that the documentation is grouped out. And I'm just using block input here as an example because that's what I have implemented. But for a lot of other commands, like heaven forbid, all of these things under the GUI command, I'd imagine I could make several dozen blocks just from that. And so I hope that by having all this broken out, having it to where people can just grab something that says what they want to do, that it'll really lower the bar of entry for people wanting to work with AutoHotkey.
So as an example, I was telling GeekDude, my son, when he was like, I think, I'd say 7 to 8, somewhere in there. It was years ago. He was using Scratch and learning how to program and how to do loops and how to get input and then regurgitate the input later and rotate things and do steps. And I was actually even at somewhere and I was trying to show my buddy who's a programmer. I'm like, look at this tool from MIT. It's free and it teaches him how to. And I'm like, I couldn't actually use it, so I had to get my son to come over, and he demonstrated very quickly on how to do this stuff. And I'm like, this is, I wish, I remember thinking then, I wish I had this for AutoHotkey, because at that point I really wasn't programming. And I truly think though, GeekDude, that's what I said is, when you drag that over, because it's in Scratch, you don't see the code written, right? You're just dragging over and doing stuff, and you see the effect when you run it, at least when I used it. Having it visible when you do this, that to me that's the secret sauce right here, right? Because you're like, you dynamically see, oh, wow, that's what that's doing, right? And it makes it so much easier to connect the two. By the way, is the print function somewhere? Because I tried looking earlier, Dimitri just mentioned it, and I know when you load the page, it's on there, but I tried looking on the left everywhere. I didn't see it.
It's at the bottom of the text section.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I didn't see that.
And I'll probably be replacing that block with a message box block when I get to that part of the documentation.
I was kind of like, print in AutoHotkey. I know you can do it, but it makes very little sense, doesn't it? To call it print.
I'm kind of going through the documentation sort of section by section. You can see block inputs at the top of the mouse and keyboard section, so that one got implemented. Click is next, so that one's in there. Control click, I'm not sure that's going to make it in, just because it's inherently very complex. It's not really something that can be simplified so much.
Yeah.
I think I made it down to get key state, and that's about where I ended on that sprint.
With on key press,
and this has a.
I think there is a
What's
bit
that?
of the GeekDude, but when you have, let's say, on key press key X, is that able to determine special keys or key scan codes or anything like that, or is it?
Anything you put into this box currently just gets dumped into the code directly.
Okay.
That might change in the future. Something I want to do is get a good representation of like the key list.
Yeah.
Like someone new to the language, they don't know that they want wheel down or X button 2.
No.
So I want to offer variants that support things like maybe a drop down to pick different items.
Yeah.
We'll see where that goes as development continues. One thing I've also been working alongside of this is the desktop companion app. Because you might not want to work in a browser all the time. You might not even have an internet connection. You want to run things offline. So I have a page on the forum, and I'll drop that in the Zoom chat. I can find the right button. There it is. And down here at the bottom, there's a zip download and an exe download. I'm going to grab the exe download here. There it is. So you may be familiar from previous webinars or just from, you heard on the grapevine about my Neutron project that lets you build websites as AutoHotkey GUIs, or maybe AutoHotkey GUIs as websites. So what I've done is I've taken all of the web code from Cloud.AHK and I've put it into a Neutron script, and I've called it Cloud.AHK in a bottle. And this adds a bit of additional functionality over just the website, in that you've got your export button, your import button, but you also have this run button down here and a little gray box that can pop out. We look at what this code does. When you hit enter, it calls that print function. And the print function here is different than the print function on the website. Print function on the website uses a message box, where this does some fun stuff with the file open command. And the reason for that difference is when you hit run here, it actually starts this code in the background, similar to how my code quick tester does when you hit run. And then anytime you call print, the output gets dropped into this gray box here. So if I hit enter a couple times, you'll see some numbers start to show up. It's the Fibonacci sequence. as the Fibonacci function here is intended to compute. Those are the highlights of the project in its current state. Functions, you can make a new function, takes in a number, a text, a Boolean, drops that in there. You can see it's been created over here. You've got ternary expressions. I think those have been featured in your webinar series before, Joe.
We've definitely worked on them. I can't remember if we, it was the main feature, but we've brought them up several times. Yeah.
You can see when started, set count to this big blue pill here gets translated into a ternary expression. I think that's going to help a lot with people understanding how that works.
And can you put blue pills in blue pills then? Yeah, nice.
You get a very large blue pill. But
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, it's just the interesting part if it was doable.
You've got your basic set of loops. Right now, these are geared more towards like the JavaScript style of loops. That was the default block that came with, the count with from loop. Count with from to by loop is not implemented. I'm going to be dropping this in favor of a block that more closely mirrors AutoHotkey's loops.
Mm-hmm.
In JavaScript, this would say for index equals 1 + 1, whatever.
Yeah, I remember in GeekDude when we were chatting last time. That was the other thing that popped in my head, right? Probably around the same time, is that besides the built-in AutoHotkey functionality, at some point, this is where it can be really cool, right? Is you can have other like we went through the whole exercise with Dale of we wanted to export this thing as a PDF, but he's not using COM yet. You could just have a function here that says that for Word export as PDF or export, drag it in, and then you change the file type, and you don't have to program, right? Granted, I think you want to learn it, right? Because in the long run, you're better off. But it's very cool that you can level up. It gets people that are like at GeekDude's level where I have a chance to use some of the advanced functionality because I don't have to write the actual code itself, but I can drag it. This is what I'm trying to do. Oh, that does it, right? I usually get the concepts. I just don't have the talent to write the actual code. The other thing, and I know because we spoke before, is at one point you started looking at this, right? Because this had been done in quite a few other languages. Is that right? Like Python and maybe JavaScript too?
Yeah. So this is all based from a project by Google called Blockly. And so Scratch forked Google's implementation, and then Microsoft forked Scratch's implementation, and now I've forked Microsoft's implementation. So there's lots of sharing going on.
Yeah.
But by default, you get access to JavaScript code generation, Python, PHP, Lua, and Dart. So it may be possible in the future to show, this is how you do it in AutoHotkey.
Right.
But then you could hit a button and it would say, now this is how you would do the same thing using Python libraries.
Yeah, and that is awesome, right? It suddenly you can make it easier to make to cross over and understand what you're trying to do in that other language.
In general, this is just, it's nice to look at, and I do believe a lot of people new to programming in general would like something like this. Just having a simple example or maybe even a more advanced example and being able to import it into something like this. So instead of looking at, let's say, a little bit complex ternary operator and just trying to determine what it's doing, importing something like that into this might make that way more clear quickly for a lot of people. So yeah, this is a great project, GeekDude, that's for sure.
Yeah. One more, maybe a final note I would say is that exe I downloaded does not require AutoHotkey to be installed to use this run button. All of the components for doing that are included in the exe.
How do you do that? I'd like to know that.
If we use something like 7-zip to poke inside, this .resource RC data section includes all of the AutoHotkey source and all of the included files with file install. So my Neutron library, as I said this was built with, can pull like the HTML, the JS, the CSS straight out of the exe without extracting it.
That's awesome.
So all of this you get for free with the exe, no extracting or anything. And then for making run work, that's taking advantage of AutoHotkey H.
Oh.
This is Hotkey's fork of AutoHotkey.
Yeah.
If we look, trying to think where in his documentation this would even be listed.
For those of you who don't know, we did a webinar on AutoHotkey H with Hotkey. So if you want to deep dive into that, it is a webinar.
I will very much like to see how you're making run work from the compiler.
Yes. Let's see here.
I think you could extort them, GeekDude. That sounds like some money that you could ask for.
Got to pay up, Jackie.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll give you this one as a freebie.
Thank you.
But no one else watching. Everyone else, close your eyes.
You're going to be posting this later, Joe?
Yeah.
So for those of you in the YouTube audience, close your eyes too.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I forgot that.
So this is the AutoHotkey H version of AHK2EXE. You can see here, copyright 2012 to 2020 hotkey it. You pick your source, your destination, all standard. But when you get down to this section here, basefile.bin, you have a lot more options, way more options here than with standard AutoHotkey. Let me go ahead and pull up for comparison. This is the vanilla AutoHotkey. You get 3 options: ANSI, Unicode 32, and Unicode 64. The magic sauce for making that run button work is, instead of picking one of these bin files, which is what the stock compiler uses, you pick a full copy of AutoHotkey.exe. And so what this does is, in exchange for making your compiled exe much larger, you can use it both as a compiled script and as a full AutoHotkey interpreter. So when you just double click it, it runs your script. But if you pass it the right command line flag, it'll run any AutoHotkey script you give to it.
Cool.
So it takes this code and then passes it to itself, the compiled script, with the right flag, and then it just works.
Have you been using H for long, or on and off, or?
I only use H for compiling projects with run buttons.
Okay. Is there any kind of issues with switching back and forth in that way? Do you need to change your code in any way, or?
H is, as far as I know, entirely backwards compatible with L. The only problems would be if you tried to use a function name or something that now conflicts with a built-in H function, because there are a few things that H adds.
Yeah.
But I don't have a list of those.
No,
handy.
you don't need to either. I've just never really used H. So it's just like if you had run into something that you felt was kind of inconvenient, whatever, it would have been nice to just know. But if there hasn't been anything other than, oh, there's new built-in stuff that you need to work around or stuff like that, and I don't believe I have function names short enough to really run into that issue. So
yeah, one thing that could alleviate the problem if it came up in the future is that this code generation system has a way to take names that normally would conflict, like let's say I want to make a variable and I call it a_AHK version. When I drop that in the code, it gets generated as AHK version 2, because the code generator knows, you know, AHK version is a reserved name. And it does that with function names as well.
Okay, so now when I was looking at the block, it wasn't showing the 2. Is the 2 actually there, or does it just know it?
It just knows to add the 2.
Yeah, it added in the code, but does the block? The
block stays as what you told it.
Okay, so if you try to set, as you do here, AHK version something to something, whatever you wanted to set it to, then in the AutoHotkey code, it understands that it should set AHK version 2, but the user, if they weren't really looking at the code, might keep doing it wrong. Expecting something they had, whatever it might be, this AHK version thingy might make good sense to them, but if the script adds 2, but it's not showing 2 in the block, that's kind of...
Hey, GeekDude?
Yeah.
What happens if after this you say, I'm going to add a new variable. I want my new variable, so I'm an idiot, right? I don't understand what Jackie's just talking about. I'm going to drag, but I want to call my new variable A_AHK version 2.
I'm glad you asked, because that's something I tried soon after I saw that it did that. A_AHK version 2 gets added as A_.
Yeah. Well, at least that.
Well, you can see.
Yeah, because
the one without a number has been bumped to 3. The one with a number has been assigned to 2 now.
Yeah, and that was what I expected there to happen. But yeah, the sad part is that it doesn't update the graphical view with what it had to do to make it work. That, to me, that would just have been
ideal. How's that?
Yeah, ideal. That's a good way of putting it. Because, hey, it's not doing it. It's working around it. It's great. but yeah, it would have been a little nice to have thingy.
Yeah, to go back to what Joe was saying about using this to sort of level up your own code.
Yeah.
A lot of like these list functions and some of the text functions here aren't really things that AutoHotkey has built in. I like to use the sort block as an example. Like, how do you sort an array in AutoHotkey? There are a couple different ways to do it, but not all of them work in every situation. At least none of the easy ones work in every situation. So if you grab this sort block, what happens? Well, you do that, and all of a sudden over here in your code, you have a new function called sort that you didn't define. It got put in there by my code generation code because it saw you had this sort block. So then it calls that function to do the sorting. Let me get a list to sort.
What about the sort command? Is that still something you can use? I know you can't use
sort
it on
command,
an object, but it's for
it's
strings.
great if what you want to sort can be represented as text.
Yeah.
But if you start making nested lists, create list with a list of 1, 2, 3, hello, and 3, you can see that gets generated over here as a set of nested arrays. If you tried to sort this with the sort command, you'd lose all of the information in this sublist here. AutoHotkey tries to make arrays into just an empty string. When you do that, like if you message box an array, you just get a blank message box.
Yeah, I know. It was just like, as a user who understands what the sort command does, and if I just saw sort in your lister, I would expect it to be the sort command that I was pulling into my script. But yeah, I totally understand that your sort function is way more powerful when it becomes something you can use with arrays and stuff, whereas AutoHotkey's sort command is, maybe it's not outdated, but it's lacking functionality together with a lot of the stuff that's been added in L, right? So
maybe having, I don't know, because it looks like you can change colors, right? But having it a way to distinguish between built-in to AutoHotkey versus additional functions that aren't actually part of AutoHotkey, because that would kind of suck if you use something that you've created, one of your custom functions, and then you try to just tell people we'll use this command. They're like, that's not a thing. What are you talking about? Right? I know yours will have the function in it, right? But they may not realize that that's not a built-in AutoHotkey thing.
Yeah, in some ways that's not necessarily in lines with the goal of the project.
Right.
Like, I want people to be able to, grab block user input while using send, click, or mouse move. And then they can see this comes out as block input, send, and mouse. And they can learn that, there's a connection there. But then taking this block input, send, and mouse syntax and trying to integrate it back into the block editor,
right?
It would lose a lot of the usability. Because the whole point of writing it all out like this is I want people using this who don't know AutoHotkey.
Right.
And if that means, they don't learn about the sort command because it doesn't work in as many situations, then I might even consider that a good thing. You may have seen around. There's a book called JavaScript: The Good Parts.
It's a short book. No, kidding.
Oh,
it is a short book. That's funny.
It is. In some ways, Blockly, or I guess Cloud.AHK, as it harnesses Blockly, is supposed to be more of an embodiment of AutoHotkey: The Good Parts than AutoHotkey: The Definitive Guide.
Yeah, I totally understand. To me, it was just like if you have the import button there, and I would of course have loved if everything someone could have thought of putting into an AutoHotkey script on the forum would be able to be represented by Cloud.AHK. Just that's the only reason I asked for it, not because I have any kind of love for the sort command. It's just, okay, so you have sort, and I was just immediately thinking about the sort command, and then it was the UDF, and fair enough, it is more powerful to use in a more object-oriented way, so sure, it makes sense, and it's your project, so I would actually say it's go for it, whichever way you find to be best.
One of the maybe unfortunate things is that at the moment, these export and import are designed to use the XML representation of the block workspace over here. So export is exporting XML code. Import is importing that same XML code. Being able to go from AutoHotkey source to blocks is something that I've wanted to be able to do. But what I found when I thought about it really hard one day in the shower was that Blockly doesn't have a way to represent any of the class constructs in AutoHotkey. You can't have a block that represents a class. It just doesn't work. There may be a way to kind of sort of make it work if I, spend the next 2 or 3 weeks focusing on it. But it's not part of the design goals of the Blockly editor that I'm leveraging.
Okay, so the thing and the Microsoft and all of that, if you wanted to do Java or C# or whatever, you would also get to a point where that wouldn't really make sense in this.
Yeah, and the selection of languages that it has here, JavaScript, Python, PHP, Lua, Dart, they're, for the most part, languages that fit this kind of paradigm pretty well. You have blocks for, like define a function, block for something happens.
Yeah.
And Python and JavaScript are really good at, this is a piece of the code that does this, and it's nice and encapsulated. Whereas with something like C#, sure, you can write a class method, but now you have to deal with the class, the namespace, all of that. Whereas with JavaScript, that this set of blocks is this code. It's pretty one-to-one.
And I'd also say the ones that you have there are in concept very close to the mental state you'd need to be in with AutoHotkey. It has a flow direction and it has a global scope, and it has these different parts that you would normally be slowly introduced to while you learn AutoHotkey. So it makes a lot of sense to kind of stay in that. So yeah, it also makes sense to not try and incorporate the entire AutoHotkey. So yeah, I might have just misinterpreted how the import key, what it was used for. So of course it's not used for importing AutoHotkey scripts per se. It's used for importing Cloud.AHK projects, or whatever you would call those. Yeah.
Yeah. When I figure out more how the UI is going to look, these export and import buttons are probably going to change to save as and open buttons.
Yeah.
Where it'll pop up like a file dialog, save as something.xml. And then there'll be a new export button with no corresponding import button. And when you hit that export button, it'll export AutoHotkey code. So I think your intuition is in the right place. My implementation is just kind of bad at the moment.
Okay.
I think it's amazing, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is amazing. That's why I'm asking so much.
Very cool.
I appreciate the questions.
Someone asked, sorry, GeekDude, to interrupt. Under variables, does that have, well, all, or at least is that where you'll be putting the actual real built-in AutoHotkey variables?
What's probably going to happen is I'm going to, in one of these sections that probably doesn't exist yet, I'm going to have a pill like this one that you use to access your variables.
Yeah, okay.
And that pill is going to have all the built-in variables.
That does make sense, right? That would be a drop-down kind of a thing because you're selecting from the list of variables. So yeah.
Okay, good. I was reading that question as well, Joe. So great that you got it answered.
Yeah, this is really cool.
Yeah, it is.
You know, and the other really, to me, amazing thing about this, because even though, what was it, Python, JavaScript, I forget the other ones that it's done in.
Luna, PHP, and Dart.
Hey, AutoHotkey is so much easier to learn than, to me, any of those, right? So you're building a tool to help learn probably one of the easiest languages there is to learn, right? So it's really we could be that gateway drug, right? AutoHotkey be that really first stop, start learning with this, and then later level up. And especially once you understand this general approach with Blockly kind of approach, maybe that's how you start switching and looking at it in Python or something else and adapting to, you know, if you want to later learn other languages.
The look of your version here is, to me, much more appealing and pleasing to the eye. The colors, the way the blocks fit together and stuff from the one that you're showing on Blockly. Yeah. Is that because you forked from Microsoft and not from Blockly directly? Yeah, okay.
Microsoft calls it their Programming Experience Toolkit, PXT.
Okay, Programming Experience Toolkit, fair enough.
And the toolkit incorporates their fork of Blockly and then a whole bunch of other components. And you can see it's loading all these other components, and it's just taking forever in relative terms.
Yeah. Compared to what people usually allow a web page to take, sure, it's taking quite a lot.
But one thing that Microsoft did crack, at least partially, is you can switch to JavaScript. Give it a minute to spin its gears.
Oh, and then you can actually write JavaScript and then switch back to blocks.
Exactly. And then if what you wrote in the JavaScript doesn't have corresponding blocks, it'll just take the code that you wrote and stick it on a block.
Oh.
And that's something that I thought, hey, that's really exciting. I want to do that. And then I got tired of waiting for a loading screen. And I said, if I don't want to wait for loading screens, nobody using it's going to want to wait for the loading screens either.
Oh. I'd say this part of it is a bit too slow with going back and forth to really have a nice flow. Yeah.
So Microsoft got their theming from, let's see, Scratch's fork.
And that's the one that was made a bit more kid-friendly, or whatever you would call that.
Yeah. So Scratch supports these this vertical programming as well as a more horizontal programming.
Mm.
And I thought it would really be neat to work with some horizontal programming stuff, but had to make compromises, so to speak. If we go back to Microsoft's project, one of their bullet points is a number of edge and IE fixes. And Neutron is unfortunately based on Internet Explorer 11.
Yeah.
So these IE fixes are important for being able to use Neutron as the base for the desktop application.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always something, right?
But Microsoft has a couple of improvements over the Scratch environment. For example, when you go to drop a block in, you see there's this pair of red dots with a line between them.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get those with Scratch.
Oh. And that's nice when you have more complex setups. It's nice to know where your kind of where your thing will drop when you release it. So
for sure, especially if you have like a really wide block. So here, hello world is wide enough to cover both the left and right side of this comparison.
Yeah, yeah.
And while I'm tempted to move my mouse over the place where I want it,
Yeah.
You can see it's trying to snap into that other place because it's all about where the left-hand side of your block is.
Yeah.
Not where your mouse is.
Will it also just because you're dragging it around and it's a little bit choppy on my end, will it only snap to things where it makes sense?
So sometimes yes, sometimes no. If the block was designed to only accept a piece of text or only accept a number or only accept a Boolean, it won't snap into the wrong type. But if you have a comparison like this one, it doesn't know ahead of time what two types you're going to be comparing.
No, of course.
So here, in is a number, and hello world is text. So if I try to snap that in there, it's going to show like it'll work, but as soon as I drop it in there, it pops back out. Because it's recognized after I dropped it that, hey, this isn't going to work properly.
Yeah. Comparing a number to a string rarely makes sense.
So sometimes yes, sometimes no. When you're creating a function, you get options for number, text, and Boolean. You can see number and text are both round, and Boolean is kind of a hexagon shape.
Yeah.
So number and text, even though they look the same shape, internally they're treated a little bit separately. So if I go into my function toolbox here and grab a call to that new function I made, you can see it only wants to snap into the text box here. It won't try to snap into the Boolean or the number, just the text. And same if I grab a number, it doesn't want to snap anywhere except for where a number conceivably could be allowed.
You know,
logic, grab a...
that using of shapes, GeekDude, that also, like when I worked in corporate America for a long time, and I would do reports, and I would color associate things as well as do stuff. And people always said they thought my presentations, one, I didn't put in fluffy pillows and pictures, but I made it very easy to understand the data I was trying to convey, right? Using colors, using shapes and stuff like that to tie everything together. And I think by having those shapes too, it truly will help people grasp better things that are similar and dissimilar, right? And how they're doing it. So I think, yeah, it's going to be a wonderful teaching tool.
Do any of you have more to ask on the topic? Anything you want me to go back over?
You know, I think everyone's just has their mouth wide open on, wow, very impressive. Yeah, I'm blown away.
Yeah,
it's great we have people like you that are working on stuff like this to help the community, right? And in everybody, right? I mean, it's the vast majority why Jackie too, right? We do what we do because we want to help other people, learn to have better lives and learn to automate stuff. And it's you're doing some really good stuff here. Cool. Did anybody else have any other questions or anything? I know we're a little bit over our normal time.
No, we're a bit reduced in numbers as well. So yeah.
Okay. Well, if no one else has anything, GeekDude, thanks again, man. That was really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I'm always glad to share when I'm up to something.
That's great.
Thank you for the kind words.
From talking to you, we can tell. Oh yeah, this is really exciting. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, I'd say a finished program or something where you get to some kind of stable version that you'd like to release. To me, a link from the homepage of AutoHotkey.com would make sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Different stuff has been put there. And they're still using my original template for
the layout.
So, yeah. So it's possible.
Yeah, and thankfully I just might know someone that is involved with the website.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone. And thanks again,
GeekDude,
for jumping in there. Dale, also thank you for your examples and working through stuff. I know even if comms not your thing, right? We just want to keep nudging you a little bit, level you up. We'll get there, right? And of course, as always, use what's comfortable for you, right? That is the main thing I always stress.
It makes a lot of sense because these webinars and stuff are meant to really try and work from top to bottom, so to speak. So we want all levels to be represented in some way.
Absolutely. And again, there's no right answer. We all started, we all started at the same spot and just slowly keep adding to it, right? We're just at different spots along the progression. So there's nothing wrong with it.
And if it's optimizing your work, then it's actually doing what we wanted to.
Absolutely.
Do.
Amen. Because, which we alluded to earlier, Jackie, when I couldn't adapt some of Maestrid's code, right? Because he's just too advanced of a programmer on some of that stuff. I'm like, I just can't see it. And that it most of his stuff I can follow, and there were some things where I'm like, I'm just not seeing it, and that is not a disservice, right? Because he's the one that still usually does the stuff, right? But that's the thing, is you don't want to adopt stuff that you're not comfortable with, because if you need to update it and edit it, yeah, you're at someone else's mercy, and that's not a good feeling to have. All right, everyone. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Yeah. Bye.